The Oracle Network.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the warehouse.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot. 16910 means we got shots fired. 4:15 ASF. Route 291 sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Red Lake Indian Reservation today, parents thanked teachers and told stories about the violence that students saw. In just 10 minutes, Monday afternoon, a student gunman named had beaten the security, murdering a school guard, a teacher, and 5 classmates. Then he killed himself.
As we've discovered in our coverage of over 30 episodes of the Active Shooter podcast, mass shooting events, which are terrifying situations, can happen nearly anywhere. Sadly, far too many of these events take place inside of our schools, a place that most of us view as an automatic safety zone, a place where parents could send their children, firm in the conviction that they would safely return home each day. On March 21st, 2005, that wasn't the case for 7 individuals at the Red Lake High School located in Red Lake, Minnesota. Like our last episode, at the time of this shooting, it was one of the worst school shootings since Columbine, and certainly the worst in Minnesota's history. What also makes this case similar is that it was mostly glossed over in the mainstream media. Perhaps because the shooter and most of his victims were indigenous people of the Red Lake Indian Reservation. It's possible that the residents didn't want the media crawling all over their land. Despite the relative anonymity of this horrific shooting, a total of 9 people were ultimately killed, while another 5 were injured, and their stories deserve to be told. The shooter is similar to many of the others that we've covered too. There were signs of mental illness, being bullied, and suffering severe traumas at a young age. Active Shooter the podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the No Notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge in not naming the shooter by their actual name. We will refer to today's shooter as Lee. March 21st, 2005 was a cold day, which was typical for Minnesota at that time of year. Minnesotans would be eagerly awaiting the arrival of spring and seeing the snow and ice thaw away into spring flowers and sunshine. However, March 21st would end up being the darkest day this community has ever seen. 16-year-old Lee began his day, intent on committing atrocities that most could never imagine. Dressing in a long black trench coat that was hooded, black pants, and combat boots, he donned a black bandana and proceeded to collect a Glock handgun to carry out his deadly plan. Walking down the hall of his home, He entered the room that was typically occupied by his grandfather, Darrell Lucier Sr., and his longtime companion, Michelle Lee Sigana. Darrell, who went by the nickname Dash, was a sergeant for the Red Lake Police Department. The department was run by the Red Lake Ojibwe tribal government, making him a tribal sergeant. As Dash laid there, sleeping peacefully, Lee raised his weapon and shot Dash repeatedly. He was shot at least 10 times in the chest and twice in the head. Michelle was downstairs at the time doing laundry and happened to be walking up the stairs as Lee was murdering his grandfather. Lee exited the bedroom and shot Michelle twice in the head, killing her instantly. He went back into the room, grabbing his grandfather's police-issued bulletproof vest, gun belt, and weapons, which included a Ruger Mk2 handgun and a Remington 870 shotgun. He probably looked like he was ready for a military training exercise with his small arsenal of firearms, and dressed head to toe in black. On the way out of the house, Lee took his grandfather's car keys to his police car and proceeded to the Red Lake High School. The school was close, only about 5 minutes away, so he arrived quickly. Stopping in front of the school's main entrance, he hopped out of the cruiser and fired 2 shots into the air before walking into the school, ready and willing to extinguish innocent lives. The time was approximately 2:45 p.m. Like so many of the shootings we've covered, the entire event happened very quickly. The shooting lasted only about 9 minutes in total elapsed time. 9 excruciatingly long minutes is how long it took to kill 7 people and injure 5 others. The school is equipped with a metal detector at the main entrance. The metal detector is operated by 2 unarmed security guards. Upon entering the building, Lee raised his weapon and shot and killed security guard Derek Brunn. The second guard, Leanne Grant, managed to scramble away, escaping this madman without harm or injury. Because Lee was distracted by Derek Brunn, Leanne was able to warn others of this dangerous person. In essence, Derek Brunn made the ultimate sacrifice by giving up his own life to protect many others. Lee immediately entered a classroom busy with English class. Again, he raised his weapon and began firing. He shot the teacher and 6 students. Less than half of them walked away from this nightmare. 3 students were killed, as well as the teacher. 16-year-old Jeffrey May made an incredibly heroic attempt to distract Lee by trying to wrestle him to the ground. Jeffrey even managed to grab a hold of a pencil and tried to stab Lee in the stomach with it. However, because Lee was wearing his grandfather's bulletproof vest, the pencil made no significant impact. As this was transpiring, several students managed to escape the classroom, saving themselves in the process. And warning others along the way. During their struggle, Lee shot Jeffrey in the jaw and neck.
He said he tried to help a couple other students, and the way I understood it was he tried to stop, prevent a couple females from getting shot, and he tried to wrestle around there a little bit.
Students that were able to escape this horror later reported that Lee was smiling the entire time he was shooting. He had a maniacal expression on his face.
I knew we were in trouble. And once he walked in like that, we were just sitting ducks. When he got to me, pointed the gun, pulled the trigger, there was nothing. By that time, law enforcement was there. They engaged with him. He came back into my room, and he picked up a gun that he had left, and he killed himself in front of all of us.
Neva Rogers was a teacher in another classroom and heard gunshots. She walked into the adjacent room to notify the students that there was an active shooter. She hurried back into her own class, where she immediately shut and locked the door, turning the lights off. She rushed her students to the back of the room, instructing them to hide anywhere they could. Suddenly, Lee was in front of the door trying to get in. Because the door was locked, preventing his entry, he simply raised his gun, yet again, and shot out the window of the door. He reached into the broken window and unlocked the door, entering the classroom. Miss Neva Rogers uttered, quote, "God be with us," as Lee shot her. He then began firing more bullets, striking Thurleen Stillday, Alicia White, Chanel Rosebear, and Dwayne Lewis. He immediately left the chaotic scene, walking back towards the front of the building's main entrance. Whether he planned to leave and go on a rampage elsewhere will never be known. At precisely that moment, the police arrived at school. It was exactly 2:52 p.m., and they immediately began exchanging gunfire with Lee. The shootout lasted nearly 4 minutes. It doesn't seem that long when you say it out loud, but imagine hearing the sounds of gunshots blasting back and forth for 4 long minutes. It would be absolutely terrifying. No police officers were shot during the incident, which is quite incredible. Lee was shot, however. He sustained gunshot wounds to his right leg and arm, and 3 times in his lower back. Despite being shot, he still managed to flee to a nearby classroom, which was thankfully empty by now. He tried exclaiming to the police that he had hostages in the room, yet it was probably at that moment Lee realized there was no way out of the situation, and rather than face the consequences of the horror he just inflicted, he leaned up against a wall, put the shotgun up to his chin, and pulled the trigger, instantly killing himself. During this 9-minute massacre, Lee fired a total of 59 shots, including 14 at his grandfather's home and 45 at the school. 37 bullets were fired from the Glock, 8 from the shotgun, and 14 from the Ruger. It was a bloodbath. Darrell Dash Allen Lucier Sr. was 58 years old when he was senselessly murdered in his own home. Born on September 3, 1946, he honorably served 30 years in the Reservation Police Department. Dash was known to wave at each and every car he passed when driving, regardless of whether he knew who he was waving at or not. He just wanted to spread positivity and greet the people he served. Dash had 6 children, 4 of whom were adults and 2 under the age of 10. He had a knack for remaining calm in the most tense and hostile situations. When he was laid to rest, he and Michelle's caskets were carried through the funeral procession by a horse-drawn carriage.
He was very close to his grandfather. For him to hurt his grandfather's, we'll always ask why. I could never be angry at him because I know he didn't mean what he did.
31-year-old Michelle Lee Sagana was born on November 10, 1973. She was born and raised in Red Lake, Minnesota, graduating from Red Lake High School in 1991. At the time of her death, she was a stay-at-home mom to her son, Devon, but she previously was employed at Seven Clans Casino in Thief River Falls, Minnesota. Despite the age difference, she and Dash really loved each other. In fact, Michelle had been head over heels in love with Dash since she was a young and impressionable teenager. She finally realized her dream of building a beautiful life, being with the man of her dreams. Michelle was known to be very quiet, but with Dash, she lit up. He brought out the best in her, and together they built a family. Michelle also enjoyed playing cards a little at the casino, but she mostly enjoyed spending time with her family. Derek Brunn was born on September 28, 1976, and was 28 years old when he was killed. Born in Bemidji, Minnesota, he also graduated from Red Lake High School in May of 1994. During the years of 1995 to 1996, he was employed with the AmeriCorps program. Derek began taking classes at BSU, working part-time at Food for Less. He began working as a police officer in June of 1998, but left in June of 2004 when he started working as a security guard. Derek was known to love writing poetry, golfing, cooking, playing guitar, and spending time with his family. In such a short life, Derek really lived it to its fullest. He leaves behind a father and mother, 2 sisters,